And for their take on the debate last night, we're now joined by our campaign strategist. Michele Cadario is the CEO of Vanguard Strategy, a former national campaign director for the Liberals. Jordan Paquet, vice president at Blue Sky Strategy Group, was deputy campaign manager for the PEI-PC party in the last provincial campaign. And George Soule, former director of communications for the NDP. Hello to all three of you.
Hello.
So listen, we're going to get to the two, overall impressions of the debate, but I want to begin with the individual leaders right now, because obviously they're trying to sell themselves to Canadians in two of the cases as the next Prime Minister, and another as to we need to have members in Parliament. So let's begin with Mark Carney here. Take a listen to what we heard from the Liberal leader last night, as he was answering a question, or at least rebutting a point made by Yves-François Blanchet regarding pipelines. Take a listen.
I think people should be kept very informed about climate change, because we are in a very strange denial situation about climate change, which still exists and is very expensive. And I'm sorry to crash your party, guys, but you are telling fairy tales. Clean oil and gas is a fairy tale. Large-scale carbon sequestration, sorry, I'm French, is a fairy tale. It does not exist.
When I was born and when I was growing up in Edmonton, early days, it was a fairy tale, quote unquote. But you know what happened? Canadian ingenuity, Canadian engineers, Canadian governments, both the federal government and the Alberta government got together and converted this.
The worst pollution in the world.
If I may.
The worst pollution.
May I finish?
May
I finish?
10 more seconds to finish, please. Let him finish his point.
That's the opportunity we have. That's the opportunity we have in carbon capture. That's the opportunity we have in small modular reactors. That's the opportunity we have in hydrogen beyond. This country can be a clean energy superpower. My government will help deliver it.
Okay, so obviously Mark Carney is trying to win his first general election, and there you have him answering Yves-François Blanchet. One of many points where he was being taken on by the different party leaders. Michele, what do you make of the Liberal leader's performance last night?
I was impressed. No surprise, I'm a Liberal, but he did what he had to do. He was really calm on stage for it being his first kind of platform like that, when everybody was coming at him. And he demonstrated what Canadians seem to like about him. He is a boring economist who really knows the economy and who really knows how to get it functioning, and what we need to do as a country, as he says, to catalyze ourselves and to be less dependent on the United States. When he talks, sure, it's not the most riveting, but boy, it's substantial and it gives depth. And I think that's what he needed to do, and that's what he needed to convey. So I say, job well done.
Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, he kind of skated along, but I mean, he's still on, as we just saw from the clip here, on some of these energy type policies, he has still been talking out of both sides of his mouth. So I would expect the Conservatives and perhaps the NDP to also exploit this going forward. I mean, he still won't commit to repealing Bill C-69. It came up at the debate last night. He wouldn't bite on it. And he says one thing in Alberta and says something different in Quebec. So yeah, I mean, he didn't have a disastrous night. I mean, he kind of skated through most of it, ran, kind of a typical front runner thing. But yeah, I would expect to see some of these clips really be exploited over the next few days with the other parties.
George?
Yeah, I mean, I think, frankly, I think all the leaders did what they had to do. I would argue that Jagmeet did a little more than that. But, I think as we saw in David's numbers, I think by and large, people just kind of saw what they wanted to see out of their leaders, which means none of them failed. And so we'll see in the next few days if that changes. What I will say to the boring part, I think, again, this morning, Mark Carney was asked what makes him different than Justin Trudeau. He chose to talk about how he scrapped or brought back, I guess, the big tax giveaway to the richest Canadians that Justin Trudeau had canceled. But I think what he probably should have said was, you should have seen my debate last night. I'm not the drama teacher. I am a boring economist. Okay,
and David, by the way, David Cletto behind Abacus Data, just to go by first name. But it's interesting you bring that up that point, because I do want to also talk about Pierre Poilievre and his performance, because the clip I'm going to play here is where he tried to tie Mark Carney to the last 9 years of Liberal government. Take a listen to what we heard from the Conservative leader.
And are you prepared to elect the same Liberal MPs, the same Liberal ministers, the same Liberal staffers all over again for a fourth term? Mr. Carney, Justin Trudeau's staffers are actually here with you at this debate in Montreal, writing the talking points that you are regurgitating into the microphone. Ooh. How can we possibly believe that you are any different than the previous 10 years of Liberal government.
25 seconds.
Okay, so we're all giggling a little bit because Yves-François Blanchette, ooh, painful, if you're wondering who that voice was. But what do you make of what we heard from Mr. Poilievre?
I thought he was very effective in trying to make that case and tying him to before. And for Yves-François Blanchette, he did the same thing in the French debate the night before as well. Said it's the same ministers, same staff, same policies. So yeah, Poilievre really helped capitalize on that last night. I thought those were some very good exchanges, and that's certainly what one of the Conservative goals was going into it, is really make that point that would stick. This isn't about change if you vote for the Liberals, and then switching that message back to affordability.
Okay, Jordan uses the word stick, but I'm kind of wondering whether or not you think it did stick on Mark Carney, if that's something that Liberals need to be worried about.
I actually think that was one of his more weaker points of the debate. I think that any time that he's talking about the past and talking about Justin Trudeau, he isn't talking about what Canadians are concerned about, and he's certainly not.
For Pierre Poilievre.
In terms of Pierre Poilievre, he's not talking about the future, and he's not talking about the challenges that we're facing. And so, I think that Mr. Poilievre had an okay showing last night, but that was actually one of the weakest parts of his debate, I think.
George?
I agree with Michele. I think that trying to go backwards, again, they're trying to run the campaign that they prepared for 2 years, but it's not the campaign they're in anymore. And I think there's lots of other ways to go after Mr. Carney. I think what the truth is that what you're going to see more and more, at least in policies, and we've already started to see, is that Mr. Carney's more and more like to the right, like closer to the Conservatives than Justin Trudeau ever was. I just don't think people buy it.
Okay. Well, let's bring in Mr. Singh now, because that essentially was also the point that the NDP leader was trying to make last night. Take a listen to a bit of an exchange that we heard from Jagmeet Singh last night.
The problem is who have you served? You've served to benefit those at the very top. You jacked up the price of homes for people living in affordable homes as a strategic decision. You dodged taxes. And then your decisions as Prime Minister show you're not prioritizing people, but you're prioritizing big business, billionaires.
You're literally talking about hundreds of thousands, not jobs, but careers in the trade. And that's why we're investing in apprenticeships and mid-career.
But I think people are worried, Mr. Carney, if New Democrats aren't there to force Liberals to make sure they remember about people they will forget.
Okay, essentially making the point that you're making in terms of the survival of the NDP, because there is a bit of this existential threat with the results coming up in a week's time if the NDP do not get at least 11 seats in the House of Commons. So what do you make of what you heard from Mr. Singh last night?
Well, I think that's crucial. I think a couple things. One, the Liberals are going to do what the Liberals always do at the end of a campaign, is say that the only way to stop the Conservatives is to vote Liberal. And I think the message to people at home is if you have a New Democrat MP right now, that's a clear sign that that's how you beat Conservatives, is re-elect your MP. And there's a few other ridings where that's true as well. And I think that's a clear message. And the other part of it is also, don't forget, like, not all Liberals are Justin Trudeau. Paul Martin was, and with due respect, but Paul Martin was the Prime Minister that got me to become a progressive. I saw what the damage that was done. We discussed why he did them, but through the massive cuts to healthcare, the massive cuts to transfers to the provinces. And what we've seen Mark Carney already talk about the need to balance the budget in 3 years, which is $43 billion in cuts. So I think we need New Democrats there to say, hopefully hold the balance of power, to say, you want to cut things? You can't do that. Let's continue to help people, especially through these dangerous times with Donald Trump.
Do you see what you did, Michele? Do you see what you did?
I could go back at that as the bond markets were coming after us, and we actually kept our AAA rating, and that's why we have healthcare today. But I'll focus back on Mr. Singh's, and I think that he was, I empathize that he was in a difficult spot last night. He has to get noticed, and so I think that forced him to be probably less polite than he otherwise is as a person, in terms of interrupting and kind of chirping every so often. But they're fighting for the very existence, and so I get that. I'm not, and I think that it will be interesting because he had to balance, going after the Conservatives because he so fulsomely disagrees with everything that they are about, with also trying to, go after the Liberals a bit too. And so you could see that his strategy was very split, and I'm not sure how that kind of, how Canadians would be viewing that sitting at home if he succeeded in what he was trying to do.
Jordan?
I certainly think he was a lot chippier than he normally is, and that he perhaps needed to be. And I couldn't quite understand perhaps why he was going after Pierre Poilievre the whole time instead of focusing on Mark Carney, because that's where they need to take the votes from. To Michele's point, I think it is just because of an ideological reason they're so fundamentally opposed. But yeah, no, I think Jagmeet Singh he's kind of just swinging for the fences here because he's likely has some regret. I mean, had he not been in a de facto coalition with the Liberals for a while, supplying confidence, whatever we want to call it, he'd probably be sitting as opposition leader right now with a caucus of 60 or 70 people. But
you can call
he's
it what
not.
it was, or we can call it some other name if you want.
Yeah, sure. yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
There'll be two things really quickly on that. Is that first, people are looking, either they're with Pierre Poilievre or they're against. And one of the things that needs to happen is that Jagmeet Singh needs to demonstrate that he can fight Pierre Poilievre and we can defeat Conservatives. And the fact is, through a lot of British Columbia, Northern Ontario, Southwestern Ontario, and some other places, it is New Democrats who are going head-to-head with the blue team. So that's important there. And I think to defend it, because there's other points out there a lot, it is true. And it's not like New Democrats are dumb. We saw it in the fall. I wasn't there, but I'm sure his staff around Jagmeet and Jagmeet saw that if they'd pulled the government down in September, sure, they could have gotten 50, 60, 80 seats. But it would have been a majority Conservative government. We wouldn't have pharmacare, we wouldn't have dental care, and so the decision was, let's move forward and fight to get these programs to people's hands and then see where it lands, and now they're reaping what they sowed. But that's the reality of what happened in the fall.
It is, but I mean, they could have been rebuilding and focusing on actually fighting to form the next government instead of just fighting to get a handful of seats. And that's
and I'm sorry to interrupt, I only got a couple of minutes, but a quick go around though. How do the individual parties use what happened in the debates to their advantage in this last week of campaigning, or are the debates done and forget about it, you move on? Michele? I
think parties will be looking through everything, taking what clips that they can, kind of splicing them out and using them in terms of advertising, probably on social media and that. There was no big moment of the whole thing, so most Canadians will forget about it. Some of it might be pushed to their feeds in a certain way, depending on who you are, where you live, and where you might kind of think to fall in the election campaign, but I think it's going to be mostly forgotten, both English and French, and so, but it was done, and some issues got talked about.
Yeah, and in your case, he survived. So,
Good
Jordan.
Yeah. No, look, I think Pierre had a great night. I think coming into it, he was able to take some of those sharper edges off that perhaps he was getting some criticism for in some corners, or maybe why Canadians weren't quite warming up to him. I think, in his closing statement, in his part about the regret of the campaign, not being able to get out and see as many people as possible, I think all leaders did quite well there. I think Pierre really sort of shone through with some emotion on that one. But look, advanced polls are kicking off today. This debate, I think, in all parties would have served to really ramp up and rally the ground troops. And now it's gone to the ground game, and we'll see who has the best one. I think Conservatives are quite organized, quite well funded, tons of volunteers here, and we're seeing lots of long polling lines right now. So that's good for democracy.
Okay, George, last word to you.
Yeah, I mean, it was a long weekend. However, people are celebrating. Folks are coming together with the time off from work. So I think now is a good time for people to those people who did see the debates will talk to their family. I think for sure in the days that we are now in, people are going to be pulling clips, and so we'll all have our favorite highlights that we'll push through and try to make it look like there was a big moment. I don't think there really was one, but I think that each of the leaders had a clear message they want to put through, and so for Jagmeet, that'll be, look, it's going to be a Liberal government. Let's do what we can to make sure it's a minority and have as many New Democrats there as possible to keep them honest.
Okay, George, Michele, Jordan, thank you very much. Thanks for coming in on a holiday Friday.
Well, thank you.